Welcome to the Honest Reflection Podcast with your hosts, Cody Hairston and Nick Woods. Here, we want to help you reflect on your week and be honest about your relationship with God. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey guys, glad to have you listening into another episode this week. If you like what you hear today, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. Nick, how's it going this week?
Man, it's been good. It's a busy week. The kids are all feeling a little bit better, and we're getting ready for our ladies' lecture on Saturday. So there's a lot going on here at the building. So it's a pretty exciting time. How about you guys? How are things going?
Yeah, we're good. We just had Carson Crow here last weekend for our fall gospel meeting, and he did an excellent job. And my family is all healthy. We're whole now. No more runny noses. No more tissues and all that. We're good. So we made it through, and now we just we'll wait for the next ailment. But I am super excited for today for us discussing Hebrews chapter 5. Let me read through, and then we'll just jump right in. It says, "For every high priest taken from among men is appointed in matters pertaining to God for the people, to offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray, since he is also clothed with weakness. Because of this, he must make an offering for his own sins as well as for the people. No one takes this honor on himself. Instead, a person is called by God, just as Aaron was. In the same way, Christ did not exalt himself to become a high priest, but God, who said to him, 'You are my son, today I have become your father,' also says in another place, 'You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek.' During his earthly life, he offered prayers and appeals with loud cries and tears to the one who was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverence. Although he was the son, he learned obedience from what he suffered. After he was perfected, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and he was declared by God a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. We have a great deal to say about this, and it is difficult to explain since you have become too lazy to understand. Although by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you the basic principles of God's revelation again. You need milk, not solid food. Now everyone who lives on milk is inexperienced with the message about righteousness because he's an infant. But solid food is for the mature, for those whose senses have been trained to distinguish between good and evil." So another exciting chapter here in Hebrews chapter 5. And Nick, I'm excited for the writer here because the writer finally gets to talk about this high priest concept that he's been teasing throughout the letter.
Yeah, and I mean it's rightfully so. I mean, we see the significance of the high priest role in the Israelites' mind as they would see that as their connection point to God. The high priest was the mediator, the go-between, the one who made the atonement for them and went before God before them. And so the role became is necessary. It's designed that way by God because of the sin and the separation and understanding the significance of that sin and separation with God. And so since being cast out of the garden in the beginning of the Bible story, when sin entered into the world, there has been a need for reconciliation between God and man. And we see this in different ways, whether it's offering sacrifices or the priest, or as we'll mention later on, Melchizedek, but you have the role under the law of the high priest. That is the one who is kind of in a position between the mediation between God and man. And this is because of sin. But I think it's fascinating and kind of encouraging to see that God always made a way for his people to access him. And I think that's a really powerful thing as we kind of get into this discussion is how much better is it, right, that Jesus can be that point of access. But the high priest is also somebody who needs to be able to relate to the people. I think in looking at chapter 5 specifically, we already see it in chapter 4, being able to sympathize with our weaknesses. But in verse 1 of chapter 5, the high priest is somebody who's taken from among men and is appointed on behalf of men in things pertaining to God. So the role is pretty clearly defined just there in verse 1 of like, here's somebody who's taken from among the people he's serving, and he serves in the things pertaining to God and God's will. So this helps us to understand the significance of this role, but also the high priest is able to understand the significance of forgiveness as being offered through those sacrifices. So Cody, what do you see in this role that you want to point out?
Yeah, a lot of what you just mentioned, and really to kind of sum all that up, what I see is a really valuable role. Like this role of a high priest being the one to stand kind of between God and man, to talk to God on behalf of the people, that's valuable. And I think the Jewish Christians that the Hebrews writer is writing to, I think they got that, because their entire life they've had a high priest. Like, they are used to going down to the temple and bringing the sacrifices, and needing to have that high priest to speak to God on their behalf. And they knew that was a big deal. And I think we can lose sight of just how incredible it is that we can talk to God, that we can have somebody to speak for us. Probably because we have greater access now, as we'll talk about here in Hebrews. But we get desensitized to that. But being able to speak to and approach God, that's a big deal. I think about Mount Sinai, when the people first hear God's voice, they say, "Hey, Moses, we need you to take care of this, brother. We can't." Like, they're terrified, because this is God. This is the creator of the world, and he's talking to us. And they're like, it's too heavy for them. So the fact that somebody can stand between man and God, I mean, that's just valuable. And so this high priest is able to speak to God for people. He's also able to offer sacrifices to clear up the sin issues of the group, to allow for them to have this relationship with God. So if someone is a high priest, like the high priest that we read of in the Old Testament, that's valuable. And the Hebrews writer says we do have that, and it's Jesus. Jesus serves as our high priest, and as the high priest of these people that are reading this letter. He serves as their high priest in a similar capacity to Aaron. So Aaron offered gifts and sacrifices to God. And you can go through Leviticus, you can read through all the different types of sacrifices that were brought. Well, Jesus offers prayers with tears, right? Because he cares about these people. And he even offers himself as a sacrifice. So again, you got gifts and sacrifices, prayers and sacrifices. He's doing the same type of thing. Aaron was clothed with weakness, and so he could understand where the people were coming from. Because before Aaron can offer a sacrifice for anybody else, he's got to offer one for himself. He's got to purify and cleanse himself first, because he sinned. He's just like everybody else. But because of that, he gets it. He understands where people are coming from. Jesus was also clothed with weakness, in the sense that he had a physical body that was tempted just like we are. We read that back in chapter 4, that Jesus can identify and can sympathize with our weakness, because he had that physical body too. Now, he was able to overcome those things, which Aaron was not able to do. But guess what? He still has that understanding of what it means to, and what it feels like to be tempted. And another real big point of comparison that the writer gives here is, like, you can't just decide to be the high priest one day. You can't like aspire. You can't go to school, for a certain amount of years and become the high priest. So Aaron was chosen by God to be the high priest, and then his lineage, all the people coming after him, God said, "Hey, you are the high priest," because they couldn't just assume that role. God had to give it to them. Well, he says Jesus, he didn't just up one day and say, "I'm the high priest." No, God said he was the high priest. And he quotes from Psalm 110, "You are my son, today I become your father. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek." That's Psalm 110. And the Hebrews writer says, hey, let's talk about Christ, right? He is the son. He is the one of whom God has become his father. And so God said he's the high priest, in a very similar way to how he said that Aaron was the high priest as well. So there's a lot of similarities, at least when we're just 4 verses in. It looks like the writer is saying, at the very least, Aaron and Jesus are comparable in how they serve as high priests.
That's right. And I think as you dig in even more, you see how Jesus is better than Aaron, in that he is able to be the sacrifice. It says in verse 8, although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things in which he suffered. Having been made perfect, he became to all those who obey him the source of eternal salvation. So that's something greater than what Aaron offered. Aaron wasn't able to, nor was anyone of the Aaronic priesthood able to offer eternal salvation. And so Jesus is offering already something better, because he suffered as we do. He understands what we need. And so he matches the qualification of serving in this role. And then he sacrificed himself. So he's not offering an animal as a sacrifice, but he's offering himself. And I think when we see that things in which he suffered and having been made perfect is kind of a reference also to like the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus as the sacrifice, and then being seated as the high priest in heaven, um, his obedience came through his trusting in God's plan. And I was thinking about this in relationship to Aaron. Like, as Jesus is made perfect, he also lived without sin, as we've already referenced. We've seen this, that made him in a way better than Aaron, because Aaron lived, and as we do, he sinned. He lived and he didn't trust God's plan. He went to Mount Sinai with Moses. He saw the plagues with Moses. He was even Moses' mouthpiece for a time. And then when Moses went away to get the law, he allowed the people to cause him to doubt God's plan. Jesus never doubted God's plan. He went through his life. He suffered. He went to the cross, and he confidently said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. He confidently said, it is finished. And his sticking to God's plan allowed him to be placed as the high priest in a better position than Aaron. He's better than the other high priest who came before him because of that eternal salvation that I mentioned. And he offers something greater to us, which is complete reconciliation with God through his own body as a sacrifice. But as you mentioned, he was chosen by God. He was appointed by God to serve, just like Aaron was chosen by God to serve, which puts him in a position of God's chosen instrument in this conversation as well.
Yeah, I was kind of looking this up, and maybe you can help me out. Like, it also seems like when God chooses Jesus, like, I mean, he's speaking almost like directly to him, like, you are a priest through this prophecy. You don't really have anything directly like that with Aaron. I mean, God tells Moses, hey, Aaron is going to do this and Aaron's family is going to do this, but that's going through Moses, right? He's speaking like right to Jesus and saying these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that's kind of like another example of he's just superior. He's better. So, like, I mean, he spoke right to Jesus. Jesus provides eternal salvation in a way that Aaron wasn't able to. Jesus lived without sin. So he's superior. So I think, like, the question is, like, why would you go to an inferior priesthood? You know, if it's really this valuable, which it is, if we're talking about having access to God and having forgiveness of sins and being able to have all of these blessings that come, through a high priest, it's like, man, we want the best one, and he's saying, well, the best one is Jesus, and he'll continue to develop this in later chapters. He kind of takes a little bit of an aside here in verse 11. We talked about this beforehand, that really it's like from verse 11 down through, was it like chapter 6, all of chapter 6, that's really one thought. He makes a little bit of an aside here, and really, I think it's necessary, because you can, in this last section, you can hear the writer's frustration, because he is so excited to talk to them about Melchizedek, and he's so excited to make this argument about how Jesus is this greater priest, but he's like, y'all aren't ready for this. And I get it, because I'm excited to talk more about this in chapter 7 too, when he was finally able to get back to it. And both the writer and I understand that, man, there's some things that are difficult to understand here. But the people, he says, they're too lazy to understand. There are some complicated things that he's going to have to bring up, but he's like, man, I can't even. You're not even going to get it, because you guys need some of the basics. And then he gets into this section here where he starts to talk about their growth. It's here in verse 12. Although by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you the basic principles of God's revelation again. And that just really stood out to me, because it's like, not only should he not have to even explain these things to him, they should have been the ones teaching these things. Like, they should have progressed to the point where they were the teachers. They were the ones calling people in, saying, hey, look, like, this is what we need to do. And I don't know exactly how long they had been believers up until this point, but clearly there was just that expectation of growth. And for the Hebrews writer, that lack of growth was evidence of their lack of faith. And that's what he's been keying in on this whole time. I mean, this whole book, it's about them possibly defecting back to Judaism, them losing faith in Jesus. This is just like, this is another example of how they've lost their faith. It's because they're stagnant. They are not growing. And so because they're not growing, they've actually put themselves in a position where now they're going the other way. Now they're defecting, they're regressing, they're going against Christ. And so I just, man, it was hitting me today. I mean, being a stagnant Christian is just a dangerous spot because it usually means that you're dying and you are in danger of falling away. And so, like, I understand, yes, some things are difficult to understand. Um, some things are difficult to do, right? As far as being a Christian goes, but we've got the blessings of God right at our fingertips. And it's like we gotta be able to lock in. We got to give a little bit of effort, right, to be able to hold fast, to seize these things that are right here that God is offering to us. Because there is supposed to be that progression, that maturation. Uh, the analogy that he uses is like a baby. Just like a baby needs to progress and mature physically, we're supposed to be maturing and growing in the Lord as well.
Yeah, and I really think it's challenging too when you look at verse 14. He says, "Solid food is for the mature, but because of practice, they have their senses trained. Who, because of practice, have their senses trained to discern good and evil." And I think when you put the milk and the solid food discussion in this more general concept of have you moved on to a place where you trust God's standing, God's understanding of good and evil? Do you trust God's plan, His will? And his purpose? Can you trust that Jesus is the Messiah for the Jewish Christians at the time and move out of Judaism and into fully just following Jesus? Um, there's really basic things at stake here when we can't discern between what is good and evil. And I would even say it's interesting that he uses good and evil in a discussion about the high priest, right? Like you would think like, well, this was from God, so it can't be evil. But when Jesus fulfilled the law, if they go back to that practice and that system of worship, it's empty now. It has no purpose. It's vanity because it's been fulfilled in Christ. And so to go back to that, it makes it evil in that it's not of God anymore because Jesus is of God. And I was just thinking about that in that way. I think probably that's like a really general, like 2,000 foot view or whatever, just to kind of say, like, we have to be growing, like you were pointing out. We have to be moving toward Jesus, more like Christ each and every day. And that means that we will learn to discern what is good and evil. And and that's a really challenging thought just in the world in general. I think it always has been. Like the world around us is going to tell us that like evil is good and good is evil. Like part of the basic foundation of our faith is being able to see the difference between those things. The basis of our faith then starts with Jesus as the good thing, as the thing that we turn to, and being able to trust him and follow him and listen to him. And if we're not able to discern who he is, how are we going to be able to discern what good and evil is? If we see Jesus as the one we must listen to, then that's going to frame what good and evil is in the world around us based on his standard of good and evil. So, Cody, what else can we reflect on this week?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just, do you trust in Jesus as your high priest, as the one who is truly able to provide salvation, to mediate to God on your behalf, to talk to God on your behalf? Um, are you trying to do it yourself? Are you trying to have you be kind of the foundation, your works be the foundation for salvation? Are you trying to go another path? Jesus will say, "I am the way." Have you kind of been like these original readers and maybe defected or gone to some other things? Are you really trusting in Jesus? Do you ask for forgiveness when you've sinned against God? I mean, that flows through Jesus. When we have, one of the blessings that we have is, hey, if we've wronged God in any kind of way, we have the ultimate high priest standing ready to plead our case. Well, the only way he's going to plead our case is if we confess these things, if we repent, if we acknowledge just kind of what's going on. And he's faithful to forgive, and we've got to trust that, right? Once we go through that process of letting God know that what we've done, that we're sorry, that we're moving to do things better, move forward, we've got to trust that He's going to say, you know what, the slate is wiped clean. He's not holding it against us. Jesus' blood and His role as the high priest, they are here to help bring us to salvation. The question is are you taking full advantage of that?
Thank you for listening to the Honest Reflection Podcast. If you liked this episode, give it a like, a share, or even a comment to let us know how we're doing. We hope we've helped you think, reflect, and be honest about your relationship with God, and we can't wait to see you again next week.